Walter Benjamin, the luminous German Jewish literary and cultural critic, saw in the Paris arcades a message for his time in crisis. Some 140 glass and iron-roofed arcades were built in the first half of the 19th century. Constructed between two streets or buildings, they merged street and interior, the public and the private. They were designed for shopping and strolling, to see and be seen. In its display of fashion, toys, books, and objects, Walter Benjamin finds lost time embedded in the space of things. Howard Island, Benjamin biographer, editor, and translator.
Rather than the great moments of history and the great men, the battles, and so on, he avoids all of that. It's the everyday life of the city and what he calls the secret history of the city, anecdote, so that he's concerned with advertisements, shop windows, posters, all sorts of ephemera, letters, diaries, all sorts of marginal phenomena, and it's that gives him an insight into the actual everyday life that people were living in the mid-19th century. Benjamin thought of himself as a kind of rag picker, as a collector of detritus.
In the period 1927 to 1940, Benjamin amasses his notes and reflections for the Arcades Project, a vast compendium of sources arranged in convolutes or bundles. Complex and idiosyncratic with its multiple cross-references, it is constructed like a collector's cabinet of curiosities. From 1915 to 1940, Benjamin writes about 300 letters to his close friend, Gerhard Scholem, in a charged exchange of ideas. He tells Scholem, "You are the better archivist of my work." Through the letters, we can trace the development of Benjamin's Arcades project.
Berlin, January 30th, 1928. I am currently working carefully and provisionally on the highly remarkable and extremely precarious essay, Paris Arcades, a dialectical fairy play. Berlin, May 24th, 1928. The work on the Paris Arcades is taking on an ever more mysterious and insistent mien, and howls into my nights like a small beast if I have failed to water it at the most distant springs during the day. It gives me no respite.
With the Nazis' rise to power in January 1933, the persecution of the Jews increased dramatically. Benjamin writes, "Every attitude or manner of expression that does not fully conform to the official one is terrorized. There is no document of culture which is not at the same time a document of barbarism." Benjamin leaves Germany on March 17, 1933, and goes into exile in Paris. Deprived of means, he moves from place to place, and life becomes increasingly difficult and solitary. Benjamin responds to the shattering of his life with renewed work on 19th century Paris, and is further drawn to the poet Charles Baudelaire, its principal protagonist. Paris changes, but nothing of my melancholy gives way. New palaces, scaffolding, blocks, old suburbs, everything for me becomes allegory, while my dear memories are heavier than rocks.
Paris, April 14th, 1938. I want to show how Baudelaire is embedded in the 19th century, and the vision of this must be seen as fresh as that of a stone that has been lodged in the soil of a forest for decades, and whose imprint, after we have laboriously rolled it away from its place, lies before us with pristine distinctness.
Bejamin roamed the streets of Paris like Baudelaire's flaneur, a prince who rejoices in his own incognito. Couldn't an exciting film be made from the map of Paris, from the unfolding of its various aspects in temporal succession, from the compression of a centuries-long movement of streets, boulevards, arcades, and squares into the space of half an hour? And does the flaneur do anything different? Paris created the type of the flaneur. The city splits for him into its dialectical poles. It opens up to him as a landscape, even as it closes around him, as a room. The street conducts the flaneur into a vanished time. For him, every street is precipitous. Nevertheless, it always remains the time of a childhood. The phantasmagoria of the flaneur, to read from faces the profession, the ancestry, the character. Preformed in the figure of the flaneur is that of the detective. The intoxicated interpenetration of street and residence, such as comes about in the Paris of the 19th century, and especially in the experience of the flaneur, has prophetic value. Insofar as the flaneur presents himself in the marketplace, his flânerie reflects the fluctuations of commodities. Granville, in his drawings, has often depicted the adventures of the strolling commodity. Every fashion is to some extent a bitter satire on love. All sexual perversities are suggested in every fashion by the most ruthless means. Every fashion is filled with secret resistances to love. In the competition surrounding the material ornament of attire, the popularity of dolls is put to use. Charles Fourier, 1829. They are the true fairies of these arcades, more saleable and more worn than the life-sized ones, the formerly world-famous Parisian dolls. At a certain point in time, the motif of the doll acquires a socio-critical significance.
Paris, April 8, 1939. The overall conception of the Baudelaire, which now only exists as a draft, of course, shows the philosophical bow being bent to its greatest extent possible.
The historian today has only to erect a slender but sturdy scaffolding, a philosophical structure, in order to draw the most vital aspect of the past into his net. A philosopher who wishes here to garner fresh perspectives must be someone immune to vertigo, an independent and, if need be, solitary worker. To write history means giving dates their physiognomy. Pedagogic side of this undertaking: to educate the image-making medium within us, raising it to a stereoscopic and dimensional seeing into the depths of historical shadows. Borchardt, Berlin, 1923. The historian is the herald who invites the dead to the table. Method of this project? Literary montage. I needn't say anything, merely show. I shall purloin no valuable, appropriate, no ingenious formulations, but the rags, the refuse, these I will not inventory, but allow in the only way possible to come into their own, by making use of them. Carry over the principle of montage into history. That is, to assemble large-scale constructions out of the smallest and most precisely cut components. Indeed, to discover in the analysis of the small individual moment the crystal of the total event. It's not that what is past casts its light on what is present, or what is present its light on what is past. Rather, image is that wherein what has been comes together in a flash with the now to form a constellation. In other words, image is dialectics at a standstill. My thinking is related to theology as blotting pad is related to ink. It is saturated with it. Were one to go by the blotter, however, nothing of what is written would remain. No decline of the arcades, but sudden transformation. At one blow, they became the hollow mold from which the image of modernity was cast. Here the century mirrored with satisfaction its most recent past. Hitler invades Poland in September 1939. France declares war on Germany. Bejamin is sent to an internment camp in Gurs, and then to the Nièvre work camp. Thanks to intervention, he is released. Amidst the mounting danger and despite the urging of friends, it is not until June 1940, when Germany occupies Paris, that Bejamin is willing to abandon his research and flee. He entrusts his notes and materials for the Arcades project to his friend Georges Bataille at the Bibliothèque Nationale. Despite a heart condition, Bejamin, with the aid of a guide, Lisa Fitko, makes the difficult trek across the Pyrenees into Spain. The plan, to reach the United States by way of Portugal. When his visa is not recognized by the Spanish border police, he is to be turned over to the Gestapo in the morning. The night of September 26, 1940, Walter Bejamin commits suicide. Much of the Arcades project was retrieved after the war from the Bibliothèque Nationale in Paris. Adorno, along with Rolf Tiedemann, spent some 35 years working on Bejamin's notes and materials. The nearly 1,000-page German edition was published in 1983 and the English edition in 1999.